I always believed that love, once solidified through years of shared experiences, could never falter. Emily and I had been together for over a decade, our marriage built on laughter, long conversations, and the comfort of routine. We weren't the type of couple who made grand romantic gestures, but we had our own quiet way of showing affection, morning coffee prepared just the way we liked, spontaneous back rubs after long workdays, and the kind of shorthand communication that only comes from years of understanding. We met in our early 20s, both of us fresh out of college and eager to carve out our place in the world. She was magnetic in a way that drew people in without effort. Her laughter filled rooms, her intelligence was sharp yet never intimidating, and her presence made even mundane moments feel significant. I often caught myself just watching her, wondering how someone like me had ended up with someone like her. I wasn't unattractive or unaccomplished. I had a solid job in IT, good friends, and a stable life. But Emily? She had a glow about her, a charisma that made people take notice. Over the years, I had accepted that she was the more social one, the one who could effortlessly befriend strangers, the one who made plans while I followed along. I never saw it as a problem. If anything, I admired her for it. Life had been good to us. We had a beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with well-manicured lawns and friendly nods from neighbors. Our bedroom was our sanctuary, a space filled with personal touches, photos from vacations, books stacked on our nightstands, the faint scent of lavender from the diffuser she always kept on. I never imagined that space would become the site of my greatest heartbreak. The first signs of change were subtle. Emily started staying out later than usual, her work events and dinners with friends growing more frequent. At first, I didn't think much of it. She had always been busy, always had a full social calendar. But there was a shift. Text messages she would quickly hide, a slight edge in her voice when I asked about her plans, the way she started dressing with more effort even for the most casual outings. I ignored it. Not because I didn't see it, but because acknowledging it meant admitting that something was wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where there were none. I wanted to believe in the woman I had married, in the life we had built. But doubt has a way of creeping in, settling into the cracks until it becomes impossible to ignore. Doubt is a slow poison. It seeps in through the smallest of cracks, gnawing away at the certainty you once held. At first, I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize the changes in Emily's behavior. She had a demanding job, friends who needed her, a social life I had never tried to stifle. But the more I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, the more the unease took root. The late nights became more frequent. At first, they were justified with meetings, client dinners, and the occasional girls' night out. Then they became vague. She would come home with the scent of perfume stronger than usual, her lipstick faded but still there, her smile too careful. When I asked how her night was, her answers were clipped, just fine, nothing special. But it was the way she avoided my eyes that unsettled me the most. Emily had always been an open book. We had spent years sharing every detail of our lives, from the most mundane moments to our deepest fears. But now, there were missing pieces in her stories, contradictions that she never used to make. She would mention having dinner with a friend, but when I casually asked that friend about it weeks later, she looked at me in confusion. She hadn't seen Emily in months. Still, I said nothing. I told myself that marriages go through phases, that maybe she was just going through something she didn't know how to talk about yet. But the nagging feeling in my gut refused to go away. It worsened when she began guarding her phone. Emily had never been secretive with her phone. It would sit on the kitchen counter, face up, buzzing with texts from friends and coworkers. But now, she carried it everywhere. She would angle it away when she typed, and whenever it buzzed, she would pick it up with a quick glance and then tuck it away as if the message didn't matter. One night, as she slept, I reached for it, just to see if my fears had any foundation. It was locked. She had changed the passcode. I lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. That was the moment when the last of my denial shattered. Something was wrong. I started watching more closely. Not in an obvious way, but in the quiet, calculating way of a man who is slowly realizing his wife is slipping away. I noticed how she started dressing differently, not just nicer, but deliberately. Lingerie I hadn't seen before. Shoes she had no reason to wear to the office. The way she would linger in front of the mirror longer than usual before heading out. Then there were the disappearances. Times when she said she was at work, but when I checked her location on the shared tracking app we had always used without thought, she wasn't there. The pings showed her in parts of town where she had no reason to be. And still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof. Once doubt took hold, it became an obsession, consuming my thoughts from the moment I woke up to the moment I fell asleep beside her, wondering if she was dreaming of another man. I no longer saw Emily the way I used to. She wasn't just my wife anymore, but a mystery I needed to solve. Every action, every glance, every carefully worded excuse was a clue leading me toward a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. At first, I convinced myself that I was only being cautious, that I wouldn't jump to conclusions without evidence. But deep down, I knew the truth. It lived in the pit of my stomach, twisting and tightening every time she disappeared without a real explanation. The way she smiled at me felt different now, like it was forced, like it was something she had to do rather than something that came naturally. She was slipping away, and the worst part was that she wasn't even trying to stop it. Her routine had shifted in ways that couldn't be ignored. She had always been social, always had friends and events to attend, but now it was different. The late nights at work had become too frequent, the dinners with friends conveniently unplanned and always last minute. She would come home exhausted, but not in the way someone is after a long day at the office. It was a different kind of exhaustion, the kind that came with guilt, with deception, with trying to be two different people at once. I noticed things I had never paid attention to before, the way she checked her phone in secret, how she turned it away when she typed. She started taking longer showers the moment she walked through the door, as if she needed to scrub away the remnants of wherever she had been before coming home to me. And then there were the clothes. New lingerie appeared in her drawers, delicate lace and silk that I had never seen her wear for me. Dresses that hugged her figure in a way that demanded attention. Shoes meant for something far more than a casual night out with friends. It wasn't just about looking nice, she was dressing with intention, and I wasn't the intended audience. At first, I made excuses for her, telling myself that work had become stressful, that she was just going through a phase, that maybe I was imagining things. But the inconsistencies piled up, stacking one on top of the other until they became impossible to ignore. One evening, she told me she had dinner plans with Sarah, one of her close friends. I nodded, acting as if I believed her, but later that night, I checked Sarah's social media. There she was, hiking in the mountains with her boyfriend, miles away from any restaurant. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, feeling something inside me crack. Emily had lied to me so easily, so effortlessly, and I had no idea where she had really been. That was the moment I knew, no more pretending, no more hoping that I was wrong. I needed to know the truth. I started watching her more closely, tracking the nights she came home late, listening for the way her tone changed when she fed me another excuse. I kept an eye on her location through the tracking app we had always used without a second thought, the same app that now showed me she wasn't where she claimed to be. The pattern was clear. She was disappearing for hours at a time, her phone barely touched, no calls, no texts, just long stretches of silence followed by rehearsed explanations. I stayed quiet, biding my time, knowing that if I confronted her without proof, she would only deny it. The lies would continue, and I would be left with nothing but my own suspicions. I needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be twisted or explained away. The idea came to me one night as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly beside me. A camera. It was the only way. I had never been the type to invade someone's privacy, never the jealous husband who needed to monitor his wife's every move. But she had made me into this. She had taken the trust one had given her and shattered it, and now I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I bought a small, discreet device, one that could be easily hidden without drawing attention. The moment it arrived, I waited for my chance. On one of her usual late work nights, I carefully set it up in our bedroom, angling it just right, making sure it wouldn't be noticed. Then I left for the evening, just as I always did, pretending not to care, pretending not to know. And then I waited. The wait was excruciating. Every minute felt stretched thin, every hour a test of my patience. I had always considered myself a rational man, someone who dealt in facts rather than emotions, but the uncertainty was beginning to unravel me. I told myself I needed to act normal, to follow my routine, to not give Emily any reason to suspect that I knew what she was doing. I left the house as planned, making sure she believed I was busy with errands, maybe grabbing a drink with an old friend, maybe just out clearing my head. It didn't matter what she thought as long as she didn't think I was watching. As long as she still believed she could get away with whatever it was she was doing. For hours, I wandered aimlessly, my mind going in circles, playing through every scenario of what I might find when I finally checked the footage. Maybe she really was just working late. Maybe she really did have a friend she hadn't mentioned before. Maybe I had let paranoia get the best of me, and this would all turn out to be some humiliating misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. I had known for weeks, maybe even months, that I was losing her. The lies had piled up too high to ignore. The pieces had stopped fitting together long ago. Still, some desperate part of me clung to the possibility that I was wrong, that I had misread the signs, that my wife wasn't the woman I was beginning to believe she was. When I finally returned home later that night, Emily was already asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a long time, just watching her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. She looked peaceful, as if she had nothing to hide, as if she wasn't slowly tearing apart the life we had built together. I wondered if she even felt guilty, if she ever lay awake at night knowing that she was lying to the man who had given her everything. Or maybe, in her mind, I was the one to blame. Maybe she had already rewritten the story, convincing herself that I had failed her in some way, that she was justified in whatever betrayal she had committed. I turned away, unable to stand the sight of her any longer, and made my way to my office, where my laptop waited. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the memory card from the camera. I told myself to be prepared for anything, that whatever I saw would finally give me clarity, even if it broke me in the process. As the video loaded, my pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out every other sound. The footage was grainy in the dim bedroom light, but clear enough. The first few minutes were uneventful, just an empty room, a still bed, a quiet house. And then movement. Emily entered the frame, her body language different than the woman I had married. She wasn't just getting ready for bed. She was waiting. She smoothed the sheets, adjusted her hair, checked her phone. A minute passed. Then another. And then, the moment I had been dreading. The bedroom door opened again. It wasn't me who stepped inside. The breath left my body all at once, like a blow to the gut. I leaned closer to the screen, barely believing what I was seeing, but there was no denying it. Another man, moving with familiarity, stepping into my bedroom as if he belonged there. Emily didn't hesitate. She didn't look nervous, didn't seem afraid of being caught. She smiled. She welcomed him. And then she kissed him, slow and deliberate, like she had been waiting for this moment all night. I felt like I was drowning, my body frozen as I watched my wife betray me in the most intimate way possible. The man's hands moved over her with a confidence that sickened me, as if he had done this 100 times before. Maybe he had. Maybe this wasn't the first time, or even the 10th. Maybe this had been going on for far longer than I had even suspected. The realization hit me like ice through my veins. I wanted to shut the laptop. I wanted to stop watching, to unsee everything, to go back to the moments before I had proof. But I couldn't. I forced myself to watch, to etch every detail into my memory, because this was the truth I had been searching for. The truth I had been too afraid to face. My wife was cheating on me. And now, I had the proof. I closed the laptop slowly, my hands tightening into fists. The anger hadn't hit me yet. That would come later. For now, there was only cold certainty. I knew what I had to do. Emily had no idea what was coming. I sat in the darkness of my office long after the video ended, my mind eerily calm, as if my body hadn't yet registered the weight of what I had just witnessed. I expected rage, maybe even devastation, but what I felt was something far colder: clarity. The uncertainty was gone. The endless nights of doubting myself, of questioning whether I was paranoid, whether I was imagining things, had finally come to an end. I had seen the truth, and there was no more room for denial. My wife, the woman I had spent years loving, trusting, and building a life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I thought about all the little moments that now made sense: the guarded phone, the sudden changes in her routine, the lingering scent of cologne that wasn't mine, the vague answers that had once seemed harmless but now carried the weight of 1,000 lies. I thought about the man who had walked so easily into my home, into my bedroom, touching my wife like he belonged there. He wasn't a mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment. He was comfortable, familiar. This wasn't new. This had been happening for a while, and I had been nothing but a fool, sleeping beside a woman who had already chosen someone else. For a moment, I wondered who he was. Was he a co-worker? A longtime friend? A stranger she had met by chance? It didn't really matter. Whoever he was, he had taken what wasn't his, and Emily had given it to him freely. The thought made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to focus. I couldn't allow myself to break down, not yet. There were things that needed to be done. I wasn't the type of man to lash out impulsively. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or confront her in a way that would give her the power to twist the situation in her favor. No. If she thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. She had made her choice, and now, I was going to make mine. I started gathering what I needed. The video files were copied onto a secure drive, backed up in multiple places so that there would be no room for manipulation. I wanted to be prepared for every possible outcome. If Emily thought she could lie her way out of this, she would be in for a rude awakening. I wasn't going to give her the chance to gaslight me, to tell me I had misunderstood, that it had only happened once, that it didn't mean anything. I had proof. And when the time came, I would use it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake beside her, listening to the sound of her steady breathing, wondering how she could be so at peace after what she had done. I thought about the life we had built together, the memories we had shared, and how easily she had thrown it all away. It made me wonder if any of it had ever been real. Had she ever truly loved me? Or had I just been a placeholder, someone convenient until something better came along? Morning came, and Emily stirred beside me, stretching before turning to face me with a sleepy smile, as if nothing had changed. It was infuriating how effortlessly she played the role of the devoted wife, how convincing she was in her deception. I forced myself to return the smile, to play along for just a little while longer. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I had everything in place. As she went about her morning routine, I watched her closely, memorizing the way she moved, the way she hummed softly to herself, completely unaware that the world she had built on lies was about to come crashing down. She kissed me on the cheek before heading off to work, and I let her go, my expression unreadable. She had no idea what was waiting for her. No idea that the man she had betrayed wasn't just going to sit back and accept it. I had a plan. And by the time I was done, Emily would regret every single lie she had ever told me. The day passed in a haze, but beneath the surface, my mind was sharper than it had ever been. I had always prided myself on being a logical man, someone who thought things through rather than acting on impulse. That quality had served me well in my career, in my life, and now, it would serve me in the most important moment of all. Emily had underestimated me. She thought she had me fooled, that I would never suspect a thing. But now, I was the one in control, and I intended to use that advantage to its fullest. I spent the morning making preparations. First, I secured the financials. Our bank accounts, joint savings, credit cards, everything was meticulously reviewed. I had never paid much attention to our finances before, But now, every number mattered. I ensured that the money I had earned, the assets I had built, wouldn't slip through my fingers in the inevitable storm of divorce. I froze our joint accounts, opened a separate one in my name only, and transferred what was legally mine. Emily would find out soon enough, but by then, it would be too late for her to contest it. Next, I met with a lawyer. A good one. I made sure he specialized in cases like mine, men who had been deceived, men who needed to come out of the other side not just standing, but victorious. He listened carefully as I laid everything out, from the small inconsistencies to the undeniable proof captured on video. He nodded, taking notes, occasionally interjecting to ask pointed questions. By the time we were done, I had a clear strategy. The divorce papers would be drafted immediately. There would be no reconciliation, no second chances. Emily had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences. The hardest part was waiting. I wanted to confront her, to watch the color drain from her face as she realized her secret was out. But timing was everything. I wanted her to be blindsided, to have no chance to prepare, to scramble when she saw that everything she thought was secure was crumbling beneath her feet. The thought of it, of watching her world fall apart the way she had shattered mine, was the only thing that kept me calm. By the time evening rolled around, I was ready. Emily came home at her usual time, walking through the door with that same carefully practiced ease. She set her bag down, kissed my cheek, and went about her routine, completely unaware that this was the last night she would ever spend in this house as my wife. I studied her as she moved around the kitchen, humming softly, pouring herself a glass of wine, acting as if she had done nothing wrong. It was almost impressive, the level of deception, the way she carried herself with no hint of guilt or hesitation. I forced myself to play my part a little longer. I sat at the dining table, scrolling through my phone, pretending to be distracted. She asked me about my day, and I answered with vague, neutral responses, the way I always had. I could see it in her eyes, she still believed she had me fooled. She had no idea that within hours, everything would change. After dinner, she showered, then curled up on the couch beside me, resting her head on my shoulder like nothing was wrong. It made my skin crawl, knowing that only nights ago, she had been in this same house, in this same bed, with another man. But I didn't pull away. Not yet. Let her have this moment of false security. It would be the last peaceful night she ever had with me. The next morning felt like the calm before a storm, an eerie silence before destruction swept through everything in its path. Emily woke up first, stretching lazily before slipping out of bed to start her morning routine. I watched her go, feeling nothing but cold detachment. There was no love left, no warmth, only the quiet knowledge that by the end of the day, everything she thought she controlled would be gone. She moved through the house like she always did, showering, dressing, sipping her morning coffee as if she were just another devoted wife preparing for a normal day. I studied her, memorizing the details, wondering if I had ever truly known her at all. Had she always been this good at lying? Had she been capable of this kind of betrayal from the very beginning, and I had just been blind to it? Or had something changed over the years, something that pushed her toward this? It didn't matter. I had long stopped looking for explanations. She had made her choice, and now, she would have to live with it. As she grabbed her purse and keys, she kissed me on the cheek, a quick, familiar gesture that had once meant something. Now it felt hollow. She had no idea that this was the last time she would walk out of this house thinking everything was normal. She smiled at me, murmured something about working late again, and then she was gone. I wasted no time. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I set everything into motion. First, I made a call to my lawyer, confirming that the papers were ready to be served. Then I reached out to the locksmith. By the time Emily came back, the locks would be changed. She would find herself locked out of the home she had so easily desecrated. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be shut out, to realize she no longer belonged here. But that wasn't enough. I wanted her to see her betrayal laid bare, to strip her of any excuses, any lies she might try to tell. I spent the next few hours preparing. The camera footage was loaded onto a tablet, queued up and ready. The copies I had made were safe, backed up in multiple places. There would be no escaping this. No rewriting history. The financials were already secured. My lawyer had made sure of that. Emily wasn't going to take anything from me that she didn't deserve. The house, the savings, everything that was rightfully mine was protected. All that was left was to wait. I checked the time. If she followed her usual pattern, she wouldn't be home until later in the evening. That worked perfectly. It gave me time to prepare for what was coming next. The confrontation. There would be no screaming, no reckless anger. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. No, this would be cold, controlled. I wanted to watch the realization dawn in her eyes, wanted her to understand that she had lost before she even had a chance to fight back. By the time the evening rolled around, the house felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, the walls holding on to the last remnants of what had once been our life together. I sat in the living room, waiting, the divorce papers beside me, the tablet on the table, ready to press play. The locks had already been changed. Soon, Emily would be standing on the other side of the door, knocking, confused, then panicked. And when I let her in, she would come face to face with the consequences of her actions. She had no idea what was waiting for her. The knock on the door came later than I expected. Emily was probably standing outside, fumbling with her keys, confused about why they suddenly didn't work. I imagined the moment she realized. Maybe she checked her phone, thinking she had somehow forgotten to tell me about a lock change. Maybe she hesitated before knocking, trying to convince herself that this was just some mistake. But there was no mistake. This was exactly what I had planned. When I finally stood and made my way to the door, I didn't rush. I wanted her to feel the weight of it, the unease, the uncertainty creeping in. When I opened the door, the look on her face was exactly what I had hoped for: confusion, irritation, and just beneath that, the flicker of something deeper. "Why aren't my keys working?" she asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped aside and let her in. She hesitated, sensing something was off. The air in the house was different, heavier, charged with something she couldn't quite name. She walked in slowly, her eyes flickering to the dining table where the papers were neatly stacked. Then, she saw the tablet. I walked past her, taking my seat on the couch, calm and composed as I picked up the device and pressed play. The footage began. I didn't watch the screen. I didn't need to. I had already seen it. Every second of it burned into my mind like a scar that would never fade. Instead, I watched her. Watched as her face paled, as her lips parted slightly, as her breath hitched when she realized what she was looking at. Herself. In our bedroom. With another man. She didn't move, didn't try to stop the video. Her whole body had gone rigid, frozen in place as the weight of what she had done crushed her. I could see it in her eyes, the way her mind scrambled for an escape, a way to lie, to explain, to soften the impact. But there was no softening this. There was no getting out of it. When the video ended, I stood up, walking over to the table where the divorce papers sat waiting. I picked them up, holding them out to her. "Sign them," I said. For the first time since she walked through the door, she moved. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the papers, her eyes darting up to mine, searching for something: anger, sadness, maybe even forgiveness. But she found nothing. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Don't. I don't want to hear whatever excuse you've spent the last few seconds coming up with. This is done. You're done." Her throat worked as if she wanted to say something, but she knew there was nothing that would change this. She looked down at the papers, scanning the contents, maybe hoping for some way to negotiate, to hold on to something. But I had taken care of everything. She wasn't going to leave this marriage with a single thing more than she deserved. She swallowed hard. I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that made her flinch. "You didn't want to hurt me? You sure as hell didn't care about that when you were in my bed with him." She dropped her gaze, shame flickering across her features. But shame wasn't enough. Regret wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough. You need to leave, I said, my voice steady. Your things are already packed. They're in the car. This house isn't yours anymore. She looked at me, truly looked at me, as if she was finally realizing that she had lost. Maybe she thought she could salvage something, that I would break down, that I would fight for her, beg her to stay. But she was wrong. Go, I said. For a moment, she just stood there, blinking as if waiting for me to change my mind. When she finally realized I wouldn't, she nodded stiffly, then turned and walked toward the door. She paused once, her back to me, as if she wanted to say something else. But she thought better of it. Without another word, she stepped outside, and I closed the door behind her. I locked it. And just like that, she was gone. The moment the door clicked shut, the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was mine again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without the weight of her lies pressing down on me. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, listening for the sound of her footsteps fading away, waiting for reality to settle in. She was gone. It was done. I walked back to the living room, looking at the remnants of what had just happened, the tablet still sitting on the table, the divorce papers now signed, the glass of wine she had poured for herself before leaving still untouched on the counter. A part of me had expected more from her, some last desperate plea, some fight, but in the end, she had known there was nothing left to salvage. Maybe that was the only honest thing she had done in months, leaving without making it worse. But I wasn't finished yet. Getting her out of the house was only the first step. Now, it was time to make sure she didn't walk away from this unscathed. I spent the next few hours securing everything, making sure there were no loose ends. The locks were changed again, this time with a smart system that only I had access to. I deleted her from every account, every shared subscription, every piece of my life where she had lingered. The joint bank accounts were already closed, her credit cards cut off. Anything that tied her to me financially was severed. Then I turned my attention to her affair partner. I hadn't paid much attention to him before, not his name, not his background, not where he had come from. But now, I wanted to know everything. It hadn't been hard to find out who he was. A little digging, a few calls, and I had his full name, his workplace, his personal life laid out in front of me. And just like Emily, he had something to lose. A job. A reputation. Maybe even a relationship of his own. I didn't go out of my way to destroy him, but I made sure he felt the consequences of what he had done. Anonymously, I sent the footage to his employer. I didn't have to include a message, just the raw truth of who he was, what kind of man they had representing their company. If he had a wife or girlfriend, she would be receiving a package too. I wasn't going to be the only one who suffered while they walked away unscathed. By the time I was finished, I felt lighter. Not because revenge had solved anything, but because I had taken back control. Emily had played me for a fool, but I had made sure she wouldn't get away with it. She wouldn't walk away with my house, my money, my dignity. She wouldn't rewrite history to make herself the victim. She had lost, and she knew it. As the night stretched on, I poured myself a drink, sinking into the quiet of my new reality. There was no sadness, no regret. Just the steady realization that my life was mine again, free from lies, free from betrayal. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I had won. The next morning, I woke up alone. The space beside me was empty, the sheets untouched, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the hollow weight of suspicion pressing down on me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. I had spent so much time trapped in a web of doubt and deception, but now, the lies were gone. So was she. I went about my morning as if it were any other day, but everything felt different. The house was quieter, cleaner, lighter. I didn't have to listen to her fake laughter on the phone, pretending she was talking to a friend. I didn't have to force conversations over breakfast, pretending we were still a normal couple. I didn't have to wonder where she was going, if she was really working late, or if she was lying to my face again. The constant tension, the paranoia, the unspoken war between us, it was all over. By noon, my lawyer called to confirm that the divorce proceedings were moving forward exactly as planned. There would be no drawn-out battles, no negotiations. Emily had signed the papers without resistance, most likely knowing that fighting would only expose her even further. She wouldn't get a dime more than she was entitled to, and any money she had hoped to claim from me was gone. My assets were locked down. My accounts were secure. She had lost everything she had tried to cheat her way into keeping. I thought about her, and where she might be now. Maybe she was staying at a hotel, sitting alone in a room that wasn't hers, staring at her phone and realizing she had no one to turn to. Maybe she had gone to him, hoping for comfort, only to find that he had his own problems now. I wondered if she regretted it, if the weight of what she had done had finally sunk in. But then I realized I didn't care. The revenge wasn't about getting her back or making her suffer. It wasn't even about making myself feel better. It was about balance. She had taken something from me, my trust, my peace, my marriage. So, I had taken something from her in return. I had taken away her comfort, her security, the illusion that she could do whatever she wanted without consequence. And now, we were even. I spent the rest of the day settling into the life that was now mine alone. I changed the passwords to every shared account, removed her from anything that had once been ours. I went through the house, clearing out every trace of her. The closet, the bathroom, the little pieces of her that had lingered in the spaces we once shared. Clothes packed up, perfumes thrown away, framed photos taken down. By the time I was done, it was as if she had never been there. That evening, as I sat on the couch with a drink in my hand, I realized something. I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I wasn't picturing her face, or replaying the betrayal in my head, or wondering how I had missed the signs for so long. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was happy. Days passed, then weeks. Life moved forward, and so did I. At first, there were remnants of her everywhere, small things I hadn't noticed before. A stray earring on the bathroom counter, a sweater tucked away in the back of the closet, a bottle of shampoo in the shower. Each time I found something, I felt a brief flicker of irritation, but it didn't last. One by one, I erased her from my space, and with each item thrown away or packed up, she became less and less real. She was no longer my wife. She was no longer part of my life. She was just a mistake, a bad decision that had finally been corrected. Emily didn't try to contact me. Whether it was guilt, shame, or sheer self-preservation, I didn't know. I didn't care. I had no desire to hear her voice, to listen to any weak apologies or pathetic attempts at closure. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. There was nothing left to say. Word of what had happened spread quickly. Friends reached out, some in shock, some admitting they had suspected something all along but hadn't known how to tell me. I didn't blame them. When you're in love, you don't want to see the truth, even when it's staring you in the face. My family, though supportive, kept their comments measured. They didn't want to say, "I told you so." But I could see it in their eyes. They had never fully trusted Emily the way I had. The most satisfying part was learning what had happened to him, the other man. He lost his job, just as I had expected. His company had a strict moral conduct policy, and when the footage made its way to HR, there was no way they could overlook it. Whatever reputation he had spent years building was gone in an instant. As for his personal life, I never bothered to find out. Maybe he had someone, maybe he didn't. If he did, she knew now. That was enough for me. Revenge, though satisfying, was not what truly set me free. It wasn't the ruined career, the broken affair, or the look of pure devastation on Emily's face when she realized she had lost everything. No, what set me free was something much simpler, the realization that I had survived. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't fallen apart. I hadn't become some broken, bitter man unable to move on. I had taken the betrayal, the pain, the lies, and I had turned them into something stronger. I had built a new life for myself, one where I didn't have to question every word, every glance, every late-night text message. A life where I could wake up each morning and feel nothing but peace. One evening, as I sat on my porch with a drink in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about Emily for the last time. Not with anger, not with sadness, just as a chapter that had finally ended. She had been a part of my life, but she was no longer part of my story. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and smiled to myself. Tomorrow was a new day. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready for it.